Greetings, Corpse Clubbers, and welcome to a brand new episode of Corpse Club, the official podcast for DailyDead.com. My name is Heather Wixon, and I am beyond thrilled to be joined this week by Stephen Kostanski, so we can talk all things Day of the Dead now that it is premiering on the Sci-Fi Channel. Stephen, I'm so thrilled to have you here. Thanks so much for taking time.
Thank you very much for having me, Heather.
Absolutely. So I have to ask, because you've been part of the genre for a while now. How did this come together? Were you a mega Romero fan coming into this? Like, was this something that like you knew it was happening and you went after it? Was it something that they were, Sci-Fi and the team there approached you for? I'm curious how the stars, first aligned for this series.
Well, one of the producers over at the Sci-Fi Channel I'd worked with on Leprechaun Returns, and I had a really good experience on that. So I told him, if anything else comes up, let me know. And yeah, really, it was just like a random email asking me hey, do you any interest in a series based on Day of the Dead? And the irony of it was, I had just spent, it was right after the Christmas break, and I was back with my family back in Winnipeg, and I had just spent the whole trip ripping on zombie saturation to my parents and being there's just too much zombie stuff. I can remember a time when there was no zombies movies or TV shows, and I feel we just got too much, and I'm just dunking so hard on just the whole subgenre. And then I get this offer and I'm like, damn it. Well, I guess I got to figure out how to take that attitude and use it to figure out how to make it fun again, And so I made it a challenge to myself of okay, what can I bring to the table to help kind of keep this interesting for me? And also when I read the pitch and the pilot by Jed and Scott, the showrunners, I was intrigued by the angle that they took. It definitely caught my interest. I felt like they had an interesting angle on the material, and it definitely got me on board the idea of making a zombie thing after weeks of crapping on zombies, zombie movies, and TV shows. It excited me because it felt like just even on the page, it was getting away from the kind of dreariness of something like Walking Dead, where I feel like it's kind of a lot of zombie shows and movies sink into very grimdark territory. And this just felt fun and fresh. And that got me excited because it was okay, we're actually going back to when this kind of stuff could have a fun energy to it, which is something that I feel like Romero's movies have. They definitely get dark, but I think there's a life to them and a spirit that I feel like are so specific to the original trilogy, especially of Night, Dawn, Day. And I was excited to try and bring some of that flavor back with this show.
Absolutely. So I think basically the lesson here is also once you're done with this, think about the thing that you do want to do, but then pretend to be angry about it. So that way,
I hate Star Wars so much. I wish Star Wars would go away forever. There, I put it out there. Let's see what happens.
Damn you, Nightmare on Elm Street. We don't need any more of you movies.
Oh yeah. Oh, go away, Friday the 13th. You've always stinked.
Well, I wanted to ask because you bring up a really great point with how this show is framed, and I think it's really a clever way of doing it in terms of the first episode. We're right in it, we are immediately tossed into the cast, and then what I loved about it was that we kind of go backwards a little bit and kind of let these characters breathe a little bit. And I'm curious for you, was it fun to sort of throw fans headfirst into this and then kind of pull back a little bit and give them a chance to kind of get to know these characters and fall in love with them? Because you really do. I went through the series this week and I wasn't expecting not that I wasn't expecting to enjoy it, but I wasn't expecting to really fall in with these characters as hard as I did. And I think you guys did a really great job of creating something that is fun, that really delivers on the gore and all the Gru and that kind of stuff, but also gives you characters that you really connect with. So when things go south, it hurts.
Yeah. Well, that was, I think, a really bold choice by Jed and Scott to make it a bit of a slow burn. And so that cold open that throws you right into it is a good tease to kind of let you know where it's going. And it works as a bit of dramatic irony as well, because then as you're watching things slowly unfold, you know where it's going to go. And it just makes it hit that much harder when, you know, you've got these characters that you like, and you're worried about where they're going to end up based off the things hinted at in that opening. So yeah, I thought it was a fun way to structure it. And I like that the show, even though the premise of it is that it's taking place over a 24-hour period of time, like literally Day of the Dead, it still manages to take its time building up who everybody is, and doing something that I feel like the Romero movies never really did, which was like showing before things go south. And so I like that it gives us the full arc of starting in a totally normal place, small town life, and all the drama that comes with that, and then just takes us through the roller coaster of a zombie outbreak and kind of what the consequences are of that in this small town.
Absolutely. And of course, you know, we'll talk a little bit more about the nods, but of course, setting it in Pennsylvania just felt so perfect. I don't think you guys could have set this story anywhere else, because I think for me, that was, you know, there's a lot of really fun notes in this that tip its hat to Day of the Dead, the film version. But I love the fact that, like, as soon as I realized like where this was, I was like, oh, like that to me would have put a really big smile on George's face.
Yeah, well, and that was my attitude from the start. After I read the pilot and the pitch, was like, I like that it's a different thing. Like if I had read it and it was just like, oh, we're in this mine, but for 10 episodes, like, I don't know, there's something about that that's just not that compelling to me. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying there isn't a scenario where that could work, but I like that it completely pulls the rug out from under you in terms of your expectations. And that's, I think, what makes the show stand out, is that it's not just following familiar beats, like the familiar beats of the original movie, but it is definitely like paying a lot of homage to that movie and to Romero's work. And there's a lot of respect for what came before, in terms of like the zombie universe and it's setting up, and just feeling like something that while different, that like messes with the zombie mythology, still feels to me like in spirit it's very much in line with Romero's work.
Absolutely. And I wanted to ask, because you mentioned, you know, we've had zombie shows on TV. We still have, you know, the longest running zombie show on TV. Is that a challenge coming into sort of this arena and getting people to understand that this isn't the same? Because as you mentioned, like I've, you know, I'm sort of the same mindset where I've kind of felt burned out on zombies. I kind of gave up on Walking Dead a few seasons ago because it was just oppressive, I think, after a while, where you're like, oh gosh, it's just death and destruction. And, you know, yeah. And the thing that really struck me about this is that, you know, the stakes are real, but there's some really great moments of levity that come through in this. And I think that energy is what, to me, made this really stand out. And I just, you know, I was like, I couldn't imagine trying to sort of put something out into the, I hate to say the word marketplace, because that makes it sound like it's like a commodity or a box of cereal, but putting something out there, you know, while everybody is sort of run the gamut with zombies already with Walking Dead. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely felt like there was a risk with trying to do something like this. And that's why I liked the tonal shift, having it be a little lighter, and just like a little more fun. Like, it's not to say there aren't stakes, but it's not afraid to make you smile occasionally while also stressing you out with zombie mayhem. So yeah, I think it kind of having its own unique voice helps set it apart from what's out there already. It was definitely a challenge, even just in like designing the zombies and the gags and stuff, like trying to make stuff that would be memorable, that people wouldn't just go like, oh, I already saw that in Walking Dead. Like we made a conscious effort to build gags and set pieces and things that felt fresh and unique to the show, and not just treading ground that's like already been walked by something like Walking Dead.
Walked by the dead, as it were.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up the effects in this, because I know this was, with Todd Masters, right?
Yep.
Who I absolutely adore. And, I know you guys have worked together before and you guys have a great relationship. I'm curious, you're no stranger to dealing with like ambitious effects and these kind of things. But I'm curious, what was the creative process like in terms of the effects and in the design of the creatures? Like, how different was this process for you from a special effects standpoint on this versus the other things that you've done, like The Void and Psycho Gorman and things like that?
Well, it was different in that Todd has 30 plus years experience working on big Hollywood projects and knows everything there is to know about effects. So in every single discussion, when I would try to bring any kind of opinion or wisdom to the table, he would completely steamroll me with way more interesting and valuable experiences. And that was my favorite part. Was I just loved that every single thing that we did, he would like reference stuff they did on like Demon Knight, or like just he's worked on so many things that it was so comforting to be able to know, like, yeah, this guy knows what he's doing. I don't have to take the reins on any of this. Like on my other projects, they're all very like ambitious and low budget. So it's a lot of me just figuring out how to do stuff kind of on the fly, the cheapest way possible. But with Todd, he's done it all, and he's done it every way imaginable. So I really didn't need to do any like R&D on anything. He was the one that was just like, here's how we're going to do it, because I've done it 20 times before. So it was really awesome to be able to work with somebody like as talented and experienced as him, and his team out at the BC shop were just fantastic. Like the work that they did was really amazing in terms of like the designs of the zombies, the execution of the gags, like everything was just at another level for me that I wasn't used to having. Like I was, I'm used to having to step in and do stuff myself. But they totally took the reins and ran with it. And yeah, it was a great time working with Masters Effects on this.
Excellent. It's funny because every time I would sort of see like a vivisection moment where like a zombie would pull apart, I was like, oh, Todd's experience with the Board Queen really worked out for him here, because it's like so seamless.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, he's using it. We've talked before about that and how he's been able to use it in other things. So it just every time I would see that, I was like, the Board Queen, she lives.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, he's just got this like filmography that he can pull from for every single gag to be like, well, we did this on this show, or we did this on this movie. And so it worked out great on that. So yeah, not going in blind on things and having somebody with the experience to really back everything up makes all the difference. Yeah, it was really awesome.
Yeah. And I love the fact that too, that like, sometimes when you're doing TV, like, maybe you pull back a little bit in terms of like the amount of zombies, or you can kind of fake it a little bit, but like there are a lot of zombies in this season. Like, and what I would really impress me too, just being sort of an effects geek, was the fact that none of them felt like repeats. They all felt like they had their own characterizations where like I could look at one of them and I almost kind of like knew their story just by the way that they were being presented. And that was like ridiculously cool.
Well, that was definitely something like that Jed and Scott had as a mandate, was wanting variety, because making the zombies actual characters, especially like the featured ones, was another way to help set it apart. And by having them be characters, then they're not just, moving targets. It's like, you look at the graveyard zombies have a specific look that, like you said, like tells a story, compared to, the zombies in the funeral home, like the embalming zombies, or just like any of the zombies that pop up through the show. Each little group has their own thing going on. And so it's fun to kind of track where they are throughout the season, and like have them actually have personality and character, which I think is just part of the fun of the show, is being able to track that.
Definitely. And I wanted to talk about this, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to do this because I don't want to give away too much for viewers, but I like the fact that there is a story behind the catalyst of this. And I won't say anything too specific, but it does tie into the zombies, and it ties into a lot of real world issues, which again, I thought was really clever because it was, to me, that felt like an homage to the stuff that Romero was always trying to do with these movies, but yet it wasn't the same type of things that Romero was doing with that. And to me, that really impressed me because, the first three, I mean, I know all of Romero's movies have a bit of a social commentary to them. But this, I was just kind of going into it for a fun zombie thing. And I came away with it, like really thinking about a lot of issues that are very much still at the forefront of our society today. And I just thought that was really a clever way to kind of make something that was entertaining and fun, but still kind of left you thinking about things, once it was done.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely weaves in a lot of plot threads that are pulled from real life and has a lot of like real world issues sprinkled throughout. As far as like the zombies and their origins in this, we definitely play with the mythology. I won't get too deep into it, but that was one of the things that really interested me, was like just how bold that was, to take it and like not even give like hard answers on things, just like raise some interesting questions on like the origins and the nature of this zombie outbreak. And it just gives like an extra plot element that I feel like zombie stuff typically doesn't have. Like it doesn't, for so long, it seems like nobody's ever bothered to like raise the question of like why, in an interesting way. And I feel like this show presents something that is fun to discuss and try to unravel as you're watching the show.
Yeah, I mean, pardon my French, but it felt ballsy to me to do that because I think so many other zombie stories will just skirt that because it can be too complicated. And it's a daunting thing to try to find a catalyst for something like this, like a community changing event, potentially world changing event. But you guys just take it head on. And to me, that was another reason this really stood out, where I was like, oh, okay. Like, I really appreciated that because again, to me, that's what made the difference in this versus other stories that are, been out there and have been being told and are being told. I was like, wow, they went for it. They didn't shy away from it because that would have been easy. It really would have been easy just to unleash zombies and there you go.
Yeah. And I find that is always the cheat, is like, oh, let's just dive into the middle of it when it's already happening. And I feel like that's people aping Romero's original works, where yes, he does dive in right in the middle, and kind of skims over the why. And so, yeah, it's like fun to be able to actually like pause and like address that and be like, well, like what is actually going on here? And I think the show raises some interesting questions with that.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask, because again, you've primarily worked as a director in the world of film. How different was it for you to be able to take the helm of a TV series? Was it a really fun challenge for you because you get more time and you get to really spend more time with characters and creating this world and this universe, versus, some of the other stuff that you've been able to do? Just curious.
Yeah. I mean, not having to be tethered to like a 90-minute runtime is fun. It's definitely a totally different beast than making movies. I've never worked with showrunners before. I've definitely had producers, like on Leprechaun, I had producers from Sci-Fi and Lionsgate and Blue Ice breathing down my neck at all times. But on this, it was like having showrunners who are like the real directors of the show, like really the ones spearheading the project. It made it such a fun collaborative process, because I feel like me and Jed and Scott like clicked immediately, and we just became such a good like problem solving team. Because TV, like, a lot of it is at a pace that's a little quicker than say like a movie. So having the three of us like put our heads together and figure things out was a really great experience. I really liked working with those guys, and I'd love to do it again, because it was just nice to know that there's other people stressing out about things as much as I was stressing out about things and actively trying to solve problems. Because there's a lot, you're juggling a lot of things on a production, especially something like this, where we're like block shooting episodes. And so being able to work as a team like that and figure it out was really great. And I would happily do more TV like this. I feel like I have a good handle on it now, and
Awesome.
feel like there's any other genre stuff like this out there that I can jump on, I will definitely take it.
Awesome. So I wanted to ask, because with the cast for this, did you, when you guys were going through the casting process, did you get to have sort of the pick of who you wanted, or was it part of that collaborative process where you guys came together and sort of met as a team and then sort of picked the cast? Because I think there's some really big standouts. Like I absolutely adored Miranda in this. She's a scene stealer in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Her character and the personality of her character, it was one of the appealing things when reading the script for the pilot. So I was like, yeah, this is the lady I want to see fighting zombies. Like this kind of like no nonsense, like kind of small town politician just seemed like ripe for like just fun set pieces and situations, because her personality of the kind of like day-to-day struggles of navigating small town politics versus being chased by zombies. I feel like there was actually a lot of crossover there, and so it was fun seeing her dive into that role and really take it and run with it. I didn't really have any say in any of the casting. It was definitely like a discussion that I was a part of for a lot of the roles, but it really came down to Jed and Scott and Sci-Fi, who like signed off on who was going to be cast. But I feel like we really lucked out, because it speaks to like all my projects. I've always really been very fortunate with my casts, and the show is no different. It's really stacked with a lot of very talented people that take material that could go either way, and especially something like this that has a little bit of a lighter tone. My concern is always like, oh, is it going to be like too winky? Because that's a thing that I just hate, is when you get, especially like horror comedy. I worry that sometimes the performances are maybe a little too broad, but I felt like everybody was so grounded. It just really made the story work, and everything just really clicked because everybody got it. So yeah, we're really very, very lucky with our cast.
Absolutely. And I love also too that for a lot of the characters, even though they're not playing iterations of the characters from the Day of the Dead movie, but there's a lot of nods to the names. Because as soon as like I saw Mayor Bowman, I was like, like Sarah, which was Laurie Cardyle's character. And then of course, McDermott, I recognized immediately from the movie as well. But of course you have a Rhodes in there, and you can't have a Rhodes in this without him being a total jerk. Like he was just the worst. And I was like so angry at him, especially those early episodes where I was just like, well, of course you're an a-hole because your name is Rhodes. And I just thought that was a really clever way again of tipping the hat to the movie, but also again, blazing your own path in a way that doesn't feel repetitive at all.
Yeah, like there's no reason to just retread that ground again. But at the same time, we can still give some of the flavor of the movie with our show and keep the spirit of it the same. I really liked Kevin O'Grady as Rhodes. I think it was one of my favorite sequences. Was he has a bit of a like macho showdown with McDermott, where they're both being very passive aggressive with each other. And that scene, I really felt like, oh yeah, this feels like Day of the Dead to me. Like this is really lining up. And he's just really being such a jerk. And I love characters like that. I love assholes. I think there's always fun to direct and throw into crazy situations, because they're just a fun way to mix up scenes and keep things interesting.
Definitely. And I think too, what I thought was really interesting, because you have the character of Sarah Blackwood, who is working under Rhodes at this drilling place. And to me, her character felt, even though she's a totally separate character, but to me, a lot of what that she has to deal with, especially early on, felt a lot like Laurie Cardyle's character in Day of the Dead, because she's a woman kind of stuck around all these men who are just like ego throwing around. And she's probably the most capable person in that scenario, but yet just dismissed because of the fact that she is a woman. And I just really loved her performance in this. I just thought she was so fantastic. And I love some of the reveals about her character later on as well. I just thought it was really genius. And she's great. I really adored her.
Oh yeah. No, Morgan did a really fantastic job in her scenes with Rhodes. Like it was just a fun pairing, having them going at each other dramatically. It just similar to the McDermott and Rhodes stuff. I felt like it just had the spirit of the original movie, and just brought a lot of like genuine tension. And I thought like she played the character as like very like strong and vulnerable at the same time, and just felt relatable and like just a fun character to watch go on this journey through this show. I thought Morgan really brought a lot to the table and made the character very well rounded. And just really just made that character fun and exciting.
Excellent. We talked a little about working with Masters Effects and things like that. I'm curious, because this is something that is going to be on television. Like, did you guys have to pull back? Because I don't feel like you guys pulled back at all. In fact, I was really surprised by how gory this gets at times. Like I think it's in episode 5. When I'm really quickly trying to pull up the name. When Mayor Bowman's husband goes after their son, and like there's a moment when like, and this isn't a spoiler because zombies die and things like that. And there's just like that tidal wave of goop and gore all over the car. And I was like, wow, they just are not, they're not playing by TV, like typical TV rules. Did you guys have to dial back at all? Or was it just like, go for it? And, you had, blessing the everybody's blessing to just go, do it.
I'm trying to think of like, if there was ever a situation where they're like, hey, could you dial that back a bit? I mean, there's like the gags are so big that it's almost like they're so big that you can't really take issue with them. Yeah. Like if everything's just like exploding and spraying blood everywhere, it just becomes so insane. Like, how do you really like dial that in? Like, how do you give notes on that in the edit? It's just like, well, it's either this or it's nothing. So yeah, I mean, every single thing on the page, it was always just about like, how do we make this as big as possible? And how do we like not hold back? And yeah, like working with Todd on that, I feel like we pushed the envelope in a lot of ways, but Sci-Fi has always been great about that. To me, like on Leprechaun, they really didn't care as far as like how violent it got. And I definitely punched up a lot of the gags in that to make them even more brutal. So this was the same situation where it's like, well, how can we make this like make these beats, these gags as memorable as possible? And it seemed like everybody was on the same page of like, well, this just needs to be bold and in your face. And so don't hold back.
Yeah, I won't go into too many specifics, but the term zombie dick comes up in this, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I've never really, we've never gone there before. I don't think we've ever acknowledged that as a phrase before, and I'm curious. I'm excited in a way as a goofy horror fan to really see if that becomes like a thing, because I kind of feel like it will. I was really that was a very funny surprise, I guess, for me, when that became sort of a term that came up in the show. I was like, oh, we're going there. Okay. And again, for me, that just sort of amped everything up again in a way that was like fun, but also nobody's ever talked about this before.
Yeah. Well, I think that's key to making this kind of stuff, like to keep you on edge as far as not knowing what's coming next. Again, to like throw it back to Jed and Scott, the showrunners, like they're all about pushing the envelope, like not just in violence, but just kind of like purely in terms of like where a zombie story could go, and like asking questions that maybe another show wouldn't be asking. Like they really didn't hold back in that respect. And I feel like, like in regards to zombie dicks, like there was no real issue with going and asking that question, because I feel like we've set up a world with this show where anything is possible, and this isn't your run-of-the-mill zombie series. So yeah,
absolutely not. I wanted to ask you because again, you're creating a show for fans. Like how, you're coming into this, and you're a director, and you're basically at the helm of all these series. But how much fun is it for you being a genre fan yourself, coming into something like this and being able to kind of let loose? And not only are you celebrating things that we all love, but you're also pushing the envelope like this. Is it just kind of like, I'm sure every day on set, regardless if it's a movie or if it's a television series, is a gift and it's fun. But like, I'm curious for you, like for this, was it just like every day kind of like, wow, this is pretty awesome?
Yeah. I mean, I will always have the mindset of when I was like 13, 14, watching horror movies in my parents' basement. renting, VHS tapes of Dawn of the Dead or like Prince of Darkness or Evil Dead, and just that kind of like excitement I still feel just being in the genre space. I just love doing it. I love the world of it. I love contributing to the community, because I feel like with horror more than any other genre, it really is a community. And I like being able to put a little bit of my personality and my stamp on these things, and also just try to make stuff that delivers in the way that stuff that I grew up on delivers. Like I always want to push things as far as they can go and make them just make things as big and bold and crazy as I can, because that's always the stuff that horror fans want. And I want to just keep making stuff in that world and keep contributing and keep the spirit of it alive. Because anything like this that is slightly off the beaten path, that isn't just a run of the mill kind of zombie thing, that's like making stuff that breaks out of that mold. I'm all about, because I feel like it'll prompt discussion, and horror fans love to talk about this stuff. So I feel like we've made a show that's going to prompt a lot of discussion.
Definitely. And I think too, I wanted to talk a little bit about the references and stuff, because there's several moments where I truly geeked out, and I won't go into specifics. But the character of Bub from the original Day of the Dead has been, a longtime favorite of horror fans. I think the bar was set that he probably became the most iconic zombie I think we've ever seen, and probably the most beloved. And you guys tackle the concept of Bub, and I'm going to be vague, in a way that doesn't, again, it's not Bub from the movie, but there is a nod to it. And I want to say that as a fan, what I really appreciated is that you guys did your due diligence by then incorporating one of my favorite little things in the original movie was the presentation of the Salem's Lot novel, because one, that's my favorite King novel as it is. But I was like, as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, they did it. They really dug deep. And I just thought that was really cool. And like, is that daunting to take on the concept of a character like that? But then also this isn't Bub. This is something different, but ultimately tips its hat to that character.
Yeah. This was what I was talking about before, where it's like, you can just do the same thing again and try to mimic it as closely as possible. Or you can go in a new direction, like take the idea and work on it and try to make it into something new and fresh. And I feel like there's pros and cons to both, but for me personally, I would rather try and go in the fresh direction and try something different. Because again, we have Day of the Dead, we have that movie, I love it. Why just make that thing again? What's the value in that? So yeah, I much prefer going in a new and interesting direction, but I do think you have to acknowledge where you're coming from, and as a way of kind of showing respect for the source material. And I feel like we've done that throughout the shows, have all kinds of little nods and winks that reference Romero's original work in a way that I hope it shows people that we are passionate genre fans, we're big Romero heads, and we just want to make a thing that keeps that spirit going and that kind of zombie vibe, keeping it alive in the genre community. So yeah, we tried to integrate as many little nods here and there as we could to kind of remind people where we're coming from on this, even though we are going on a new and different path.
Definitely. But yeah, I will say, like, as soon as they did the Salem Slot, I was like, oh, we did it. Because again, that's like one of my favorite little things that happens in the original. I don't know why. I just get really geeky whenever like there's Stephen King mentioned in a movie that isn't a Stephen King movie, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
Well, he's like, I mean, he's like one of the most important figures in modern horror. And the fact that he has like such a connection with George, like with Creepshow, especially, it's like, I feel like those two kind of go hand in hand in a lot of ways. So having a King reference in there to me makes a lot of sense.
no, absolutely. And I was wondering too, because you mentioned sort of keeping the spirit of George alive, like through this, but ultimately, doing something different. Did you guys reach out to Suzanne Romero at all to kind of get her input now that she's sort of, working with the Garf Foundation and kind of keeping his legacy alive? Or, did it feel better to kind of just do this because you didn't want to sort of impede his legacy at all?
I mean, I honestly have no idea if we reached out to her or not.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
That's probably a question for the higher ups than me.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Because I would also wonder that, like, it would make sense to probably reach out and get her blessing on
Yeah,
this.
I'm just curious I think she would dig it though, because she has such a sense of humor to herself. Because I interviewed her a couple months ago when they released the amusement park, and I think the interesting thing is that her and George had she talked about how they had a sense of humor about whenever people would sort of tip their hat to the stuff that he had done. So I it's one of these things when I was watching, I was like, I feel like I think she would dig it, but I think if he was here, it would have put a really big smile like on his face.
I hope so. I would like to imagine that he would enjoy this show. I mean, I hold him and his legacy like such high esteem. Like his movies were some of the movies that got me into horror in the first place, like the original like Dead trilogy. I like, as a kid, I was terrified of zombies and the idea of zombies, but watching those movies, they're just so well made and so like have so much heart and character to them that even as like a kid, it made it palatable, and it like offset the horror and the like gut munching of those movies.
Mm-hmm.
And so all I want to do is just like make something that honors his legacy, because he's one of the most influential filmmakers in horror cinema.
Definitely. Another thing that I thought was really fun about this, and maybe it's because I'm sort of a masochist by nature, and I love when weddings go terribly. Maybe it's because of my love for the November Rain music video. But I love a disastrous wedding, and you guys really deliver probably one of the worst weddings I've ever seen. But coming out of that, I actually ended up really sort of loving. There's like these like almost like triplet zombies that kind of emerge from that. And I just thought, again, they were really so striking to me. And I was curious, did you end up having favorite zombies as you were kind of going through the show, or did you just love them all? Like,
I mean, I guess I could say that one of my favorites was the time that I got to play one. That was a pretty big deal. I mean, that's not even a spoiler at this point because I'm in the trailer. But that was fun. So I like that zombie. But
I can't believe I missed that you were, which zombie were you? I mean, like vaguely, I guess is like.
I mean, it's kind of hard to like explain unless I give a specific timestamp, but give it a rewatch and you might figure it out. It's
okay.
A clear close up on me.
Oh, okay. I think I get it. Okay. All right.
But I definitely had favorites in the episodes that I did. I don't really want to get into it because I feel like it's starting to get into spoiler territory.
Right.
But to go back to Masters Effects and their fabulous work on the show, like they they made every zombie its own thing. And so it was easy to fall in love with each one and kind of the like artistry that went into each of them. It's like, for me, it's like hard to get excited about a zombie makeup because it's a thing that as an effects artist and director, it's like we've seen so many at this point. But the techniques they used on these zombies were really fantastic and really made them stand out and made them exciting to me. So yeah, I can't, no specifics on which zombies were my favorite. You just have to watch the show and guess which ones.
Excellent. I'm somewhat of a big believer that like whenever you do something, obviously you put something of yourself into it, when you're doing something creative, like, there's always like a little piece of you in something that you create, whether you're writing, you're directing, you're acting, you're creating creatures or characters. But I also believe that like you take a little piece of that with you once it's done. And I'm curious, looking at your experiences working on this series and being a part of this universe, like what has been your biggest takeaway from being a part of Day of the Dead?
I mean, it's a lot of like boring production stuff that just as a director, it was like an eye-opening experience where I learned a lot just about managing a crew that's working at the pace that we were working at, in the kinds of environments and kind of conditions that we were working in out west in Vancouver. So yeah, like all the takeaways for me were like purely practical things that I want to apply to all my future projects. I'm a guy that learns by doing, and like every project, everything I do, it informs like how I tackle the next thing. So I'm excited to apply all the lessons from Day of the Dead onto whatever comes up next for me, because it was a pretty crazy shoot overall, and lots to navigate and lots to juggle. But we had such a fantastic team, like cast and crew, that it was like I always felt safe knowing like everybody was gonna tackle problems in the like to the best of their abilities and give it everything they had. And so it really was overall a fantastic experience.
Excellent. I'm curious also too, were there things that you guys shot and had wanted to incorporate that were in like the initial scripts or things like that didn't ultimately end up making it into the series, or was everything that was on the page there on the screen?
I mean, I don't even know if I'm allowed to say much about that. In the being as vague as possible, I feel like there were certain things where we did have to scale down a little bit, but not to like the detriment of the show. It's just purely like logistical, like typical production stuff where it's like, we have to go with one location instead of another, and then it's like you kind of have to pivot to accommodate that. And so on my end, at least, I didn't feel like there was anything like huge where it was like, oh, there's like a whole subplot we cut out. It's like, no, I think it's all pretty much up on the screen as far as I know.
Excellent. Also too, because, the last, 18 months or so has been really challenging, for a lot of folks. And here you are, coming out of this, and basically like, we're coming out of, not even that we're really fully out of it, but like, 2020 was pretty awful. And here you are, 2021 TV series, you have a segment in VHS 94. Like how great does that feel that, ultimately you were able to kind of come through the other side and still be able to create and still be able to be out there working and also collaborating with other people through a lot of pretty dark times.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a huge layer of stress on top of an already stressful career choice. So, yeah, I mean, I'm thankful for the work and for the great experiences, even during a pandemic. It's a little crazy to me that like the film industry didn't really stop. Like I feel like it stopped for a little bit. I got maybe like 2 months to sit at home and play video games like everybody else. But then, yeah, when it picked up hard, and we dived right into Day of the Dead, fall 2020, and we were kind of like blazing the trail as far as like how to navigate pandemic, shooting a thing in a pandemic. And so there was definitely a lot of stress with that, but I think we handled it really well. And everybody was so supportive of one another. Like we were all just on board because like we were happy to be working, and we just wanted to make the best thing we could with the time that we were given. Which watching the crew kind of like band together like that was really inspiring. So yeah, I'm very fortunate to have had so much work over the past year and a half. I'm not wishing for another lockdown, but I wouldn't complain if I got another month to just sit at home and recharge, because it's really been nonstop. So
just to catch your breath a little bit.
Yeah, just to maybe sleep like a human being for a bit would be cool.
Very true. What I also appreciate is because, this was, again, something you guys did during the pandemic. But ultimately, like, because I've been, watching a lot of movies that have, that were made during this time, and they all sort of have these pandemic-y undertones to it. So I think for me, I was just grateful to have something that just didn't have that hanging over it necessarily. It just felt, again, I was like, oh, thank God we're not doing this again. Cause I'm just like, I'm kind of tired too. I'm just kind of like, I just need to catch my breath from everything. And, it just, when you have like, you have to watch 20 movies and 18 of them reference sort of things that have gone on in the last year, you're like, okay, can we just have some fun?
Yeah. 18 of them are about people trapped at home and scared of the maskless people outside. Yeah. I agree. Like I was happy to work on a thing that had a little bit of escapism to it. Not to say that it doesn't tackle any real world issues, but it was just, even though we were thinking about the pandemic literally like every second of every day working on it, it was nice to be making a thing where the story wasn't that as well. And that's kind of my attitude towards all the things I'm making right now. Like I'm really not interested in dwelling in this like kind of awful world we're in right now. I would rather tell stories that take us away from this a little bit and let our brains recharge, because it's been tough.
Yeah. I know we're getting close on time already, but I wanted to ask, you mentioned, working on other things. Like, so what comes next for you? Are you kind of working on your own stuff now? Are you working on, other projects that you've been brought into? I mean, I'm sure there's probably things you can't be too specific about.
I mean, this year has been mostly working in effects. Like I worked on The Boys season 3 and Umbrella Academy season 3. Those are kind of the first 2/3 of my year was that. And now I'm working on a few other projects that I can't really talk about. And this is all in between developing other stuff. My hope is by next year to be actually directing again. But yeah, I was just kind of doing the effects thing for 2021, and hopefully 2022 I'll be back in the director's chair.
Excellent. And one last question, because we did briefly chat about PG Psycho Gorman. Like, it's been really fun for me to see the appreciation for that story and that character and this world grow throughout the course of 2021. And I'm curious, have you thought about like going back into that at all? Or are you kind of putting it away for a while?
I'm working on it. I'm trying to figure out how to move forward on that. It's complicated. There's a lot of moving parts to make it happen, but I definitely want to continue that story. In the meantime, we do have our comic from Lethal Comics that the Kickstarter is up right now, where you can basically just like buy the comic off the Kickstarter. And so that's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be like an anthology comic about all the aliens in the Gygax Council. It's all of them telling their stories of their encounters with PG and their like near misses where he almost murdered them. So we got tons of artists involved. It's really exciting. It's like kind of feel like I'm making like a heavy metal magazine.
That is awesome.
The variety and just the talent on display is so amazing. So if people want their PG fix, I really feel like that's going to deliver, especially on the spectacle promised in the movie. Being in comic form, we can really go to all the crazy places that we allude to in the film. So yeah, people should check that out.
Excellent. Well, Stephen, thank you so much for joining me today for this episode. And for those of you listening, thank you so much for always supporting Corpse Club. We really appreciate it. To find out more about us, you can go visit us over at corpseclub.com. And of course, for all your daily news, reviews, and interviews, you can head over to dailydead.com or find us over on Twitter at Daily Dead News. But Stephen, it's been a real pleasure to get to speak with you today. And congratulations on everything. I'm so excited for people to see what you guys have created with this series. And you've made me into a zombie fan again. And I didn't think that was possible.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, that was, the exact thing I set out to do was like, how can I make this interesting again? So I'm glad to hear that it worked on you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And for those of you listening at home, thank you again for tuning in. And until next time, stay scary.